Welcome back to the Metal Companies, a channel developing the world's largest estimated resource of metals required for the electric vehicle future and low carbon energy transition here. And joining us to give us a high level overview of some recent news, the geopolitical landscape, maybe just some milestone expectations on their timeline. Craig, the CFO, is always welcome back, sir.
Pleasure to be here again, Kyle. Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to get you back on. So we got a lot to dive into because we're going to talk about, the board of directors, Tesla, so much in between. But from a geopolitical standpoint, I think it's one of the most interesting conversations, kind of this new frontier of, finding these nodules and these metals on the seafloor. But maybe give us an idea of where you kind of stand on what's going on from a geopolitical standpoint.
Yeah, look, since we last spoke, I think we've been heartened to see quite a few very credible industrial countries focus even more on seafloor resources. I'll actually point out a few of them here. The United States actually devoted in April $2 million to the Pentagon's budget to study nodules as a feedstock for bringing the U.S. metal independence in nickel, manganese, and cobalt. In fact, TMC's contract areas alone are sufficient to make the U.S. independent in nickel, cobalt, and manganese, three very critical metals, not just for EVs, but for renewable energy overall, for storage systems, solar, wind, nuclear, defense applications. All of these are on the critical mineral list for that reason. And it's really driven by a lot of the actions from another flag out in this chart, which is China. China has been pushing ahead with their sphere of influence of the regulator to keep the progress going on the mining code with the regulator, which would allow commercialization of this industry. At the same time, they've applied to that regulator to do collection tests next year. So China is not as advanced in their technology as what TMC has used. In fact, we proved our commercial system in 2022, collecting 3,000 tons of these little polymetallic nodules from the seafloor, going a long way to de-risk our offshore technology. But the fact that the most populous nations of the world, like China, India, the United States, are all looking to do this. India is applying for new exploration contracts, as well as other major credible offshore industrial economies like Norway, like Japan, both of which have had headlines about seafloor mining. Norway has now opened up their territorial waters for deep sea exploration and then potentially exploitation. And even Japan has found polymetallic nodules in their territorial waters. They found a little over 200 million tons. TMC has a resource of 1.6 billion tons. So our resource is big, it's high grade. We are going to be the first in this industry. But the fact that many of these other credible countries are coming along too just shows that this is now reached a stage where it's inevitable. You wouldn't always know that from looking at the media. You might suggest that there's a big groundswell of opposition, but in reality, there is a minority of countries that have said they want to slow it down. And frankly, there's no legal mechanism for them to do that. So people can make political statements, but the legal rights that we have to launch our application and then have that reviewed are things that we're looking forward to getting in front of the regulator. And it's really going to be driven by a robust environmental program on which we've already spent about $200 million. We spent $500 million already on this project over the last 13 years. And in our market cap is about 60% of the money already spent. To me, as a resource investor, typically you're taking most of the risk up front. And then as you hit de-risking milestones, as TMC has done, we have our resource statements up. We did our test mining. We've done our test processing. We've done 22 offshore research campaigns, culminating in a $200 million environmental impact statement. And yet we're trading at pennies on the dollar of the fundamental value of this resource that we have just sitting on top of the seafloor, waiting to get picked up. So I still think it represents a big opportunity in terms of where the share price is trading. And we look forward to a few additional milestones ahead, including some of these geopolitical tailwinds that should help the valuation and get the stock to where it should be.
No, I definitely appreciate the insight. I just want to kind of pick up on the regulatory front there. Do you feel like that's something that could be holding you back? And from a timeline perspective, how do you feel that kind of starts to move forward?
Yeah, in terms of the timeline, the International Seabed Authority has reiterated their intention to work towards finalizing the mining code in 2025. What is their 30th session? They next meet in March of 2025. Importantly, TMC does not have to wait for that meeting to occur. We're at this stage now where when we are ready to launch our application, when our environmental work is complete, when our mine plan is complete, when our pre-feasibility study is complete with the assistance of Bechtel, once that's done, we can launch the application now, and per their own rules, Article 15 of the ISA Implementation Agreement, they would have to review, consider, and provisionally approve that application based on the draft rules that already exist. So we're in this zone where we can really, control the timeline a bit more than I think people give us credit for. And that should line up quite well with the International Seabed Authority's work, where they're finalizing the mining code, which would allow commercial production. And I think what a lot of people sometimes miss is they think the International Seabed Authority, which is 168 member states plus the European Union, you'll see them all in blue on this page. People are not asking them at this stage, okay, should we deep sea mine or shouldn't we? Rather, they were set up with a mandate to first deliver an exploration regime and then deliver an exploitation regime, a mining code that allows us to go forward while also protecting the environment from serious harm. So this is at the stage, we think it's inevitable. It's a question of when rather than if. And the ISA's own goal is for that when to be 2025, which puts TMC into commercial production in 2026. So we are finishing the science, we're finishing all of the work that puts us in a good position to launch this application. And we would be the first within this new burgeoning industry. As I showed you earlier, there are a lot of other credible industrial parties and countries that want to do this, but TMC has some of the best ground in the best neighborhood. And we believe we will be the only ones actually in commercial operations this decade.
So finally here, just to round the conversation off, you've been adding to your board of directors, you've been building your team. Brendan May joined. We also kind of iterated Steve that you kind of brought on from Tesla's experience. Do you want to just kind of reiterate the board members you have and just some of the experience they're bringing to the team?
Yeah, we have a great board, and it starts with our chairman and CEO, Gerard Barron, who's also a 7% shareholder in the company. Eris Holdings is the family office of another board member, Andre Karkar. He holds 20% of the shares outstanding. So between them and our partner Allseas, who's provided our offshore technology, collecting 3,000 tons of nodules in late 2022 and has devoted that drill ship to our exclusive use, they hold 20%. So between those three parties, that's 50% of the shares outstanding. And those three key shareholders have also contributed 45 million of unsecured lending capacity to the company at SOFR interest rate plus 4%. So that's a really great rate for us to, have the liquidity we need to keep the project on track and to get this application over the line. Importantly, we added earlier this year Steve Jurvetson to our board. Steve Jurvetson was a longtime board member for over a decade at Tesla. He's still a board member of SpaceX. He was on a podcast recently, the Jason Calacanis podcast, also with our chairman and CEO, where they were This Week in Startups. Sorry, the name is escaping for a minute. Where they were talking about the TMC project and how nodules really are going to be the future of metals needed for the clean transition. So Steve joined, and then a few months after that, Brendan May joined our board as well. He's the founder of Roberts Bridge, which provides outreach to NGOs, and he's also the chairman of the European Rainforest Alliance. So brings a lot of credibility on the environmental side. So while there is a lot of noise in this industry, people that are, I think, at the forefront of the clean transition and technologies that are going to be necessary, not only for renewable energy and electric vehicles, but also for overall population growth and infrastructure needed to support that. We all know there has to be a new source of metals, and we all believe that polymetallic nodules are the best, cleanest, lowest cost, and most promising resource, certainly that I've ever seen in my career.
On that note, we'll pass it off to the viewers. As always, we'd love to know what you think in that comment section below, and consider subscribing for news catalysts like this. As it hits the wire, of course, we'll bring it to you here. But on that note, we look forward to catching you in the next one.